Incredible moment, little girl's one cookie to a sad stranger revealed a CEO's hidden transformation. Mark sat alone on a sun-drenched bench, his polished image standing in stark contrast to the gnawing emptiness inside him. He had played the game of ambition for years, each step up the corporate ladder only entrenching his isolation. Tailored suits, a high-end watch reflecting success, yet the gleam in the sunlight only highlighted his solitude. No laughter echoed from family gatherings, no voices filled the void. Just silence, punctuated by a phone typically buzzing with demands. He could hear it now, a persistent reminder of the merger brewing on the horizon. The weight of his decisions bore down heavily, mingling with regret and a longing for genuine connection. Then a bright ray of innocence interrupted the tentative approach of a little girl named Lily, her messy pigtails bouncing, flour-smeared apron clinging to her excitement. She held out a cookie, graced with a shy smile, an offering of sweetness amidst his desolation. "Want a share?" she asked. The simple gesture pulled at something deep within him, a hidden longing he had buried beneath an avalanche of numbers and corporate strategies. Mark hesitated, feeling the tug of industry expectations clash with the warmth radiating from this child. He started, the words tangling in his throat. Wasn't he used to vulnerability, wasn't he accustomed to engaging emotionally outside boardrooms? Yet here he was, confronted with the pure kindness of an 8-year-old determined to bridge a chasm beyond her understanding. "Okay," he finally said, breaking off a piece of the cookie, his heart aching at the fragility of the moment. As they shared their morsels, a conversation sparked, tentative, then blossoming. Mark found himself recounting fragments of his past, the joy of his father's laughter echoing through family gatherings, the dreams he had once nurtured, promises whispered under starlit skies. Laughter flooded his recollections, years of ambition blurring the memories now glinting with nostalgia. Yet, those joyous moments felt like shiny baubles lost in a sea of dull accomplishment. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Lily asked, her eyes wide, squeezing hope from the unsuspecting shadows. To this, Mark could only fumble internally, a knot forming in his stomach. "I used to want to make films," he confessed, "but now I work in finance." The candor in his voice was laced with regret. Suddenly, he was reminded of her courage to stand out, to bake when others mocked, mirroring his own long-suppressed passions. But as their conversation deepened, shadows crept into the light. She spoke of taunts encountered each day, the hurt of being different among peers. Beneath Lily's laughter, Mark felt his soul crack with recognition of his own sacrifices, the heartache of trading dreams for status. He hesitated in that moment, glancing back at his phone, the corporate world beckoning with the promise of yet another targeted victory. Could he go back to the life he had built? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Tension mounted as colors faded with the sun's retreat, shadows deepening around them. Could he leave the chase for power, redefine himself through connection? A gnawing fear of losing his identity pressed against his chest. Just as hope flickered to life, a piercing ringtone shattered the moment. The call could change everything, a chance for unprecedented merger success, a gilded leveling up. Mark's heart raced, each beat echoing his internal conflict. Accept fate's established path or carve out something undefinable here with Lily? As he stared into her hopeful eyes, he knew the question stood at a crossroads. Could he choose vulnerability over ambition without losing everything he had ever known? The future shimmered tantalizingly, his heart pooling with uncertainty, teetering only to unravel into raw, uncharted territory. As Mark's fingers hovered over the phone screen, the world around him seemed to blur. Everything, the pristine corporate offices, the looming merger, felt like distant specters, their allure dimming in the face of a real, breathing connection. He was caught in a web of choices, each strand tightening the grip of his competing identities, the relentless CEO and the man yearning for something beyond wealth and status. Lily watched him, her innocent curiosity radiating warmth. "If you could make a film, what would it be about?" she asked, pulling him from his tumultuous thoughts. Her question revealed an avenue previously locked away, promising both a challenge and a way forward. Mark felt a flicker of excitement igniting within. "About chasing dreams, I think," he said slowly, carefully choosing his words as if afraid to disrupt the moment. "It would be about a man who loses himself in the pursuit of success, only to find that true happiness lies in the connections he makes along the way." He caught Lily's gaze, eager yet nervous. "Like how I share cookies?" She beamed, arms wide as if to encompass the idea. "Exactly," Mark replied, laughter bubbling forth. "Sometimes it's little things like cookies that remind us of what's really important." The atmosphere around him took on a different hue, suffused with the golden light of late afternoon and the innocence of Lily's laughter. His burdens felt lighter, and for the first time in years, he actually considered the implications of blending his corporate life with creativity. What if stepping away from the boardroom led him to a fuller existence? Yet, the seductive pull of an exceptional career still tugged at his ambitions. Mark glanced at his phone again, its screen now illuminating a choice laden with implications. How much of himself could he sacrifice in pursuit of success? Could he risk offending his corporate ethos, perhaps even jeopardizing the merger that had consumed his life for so long? These thoughts swirled, intertwining with the hope that Lily's kindness had incited. "Do you think I should go?" he asked, voicing the friction within. "To answer this call?" The question flickered between them, the weight of corporate allegiance colliding with the burgeoning sense of authenticity he felt in Lily's presence. "I think you should follow your heart," she said simply, and in her innocence, she spoke wisps of wisdom that wrapped around Mark's heart. Her words, so straightforward yet profound, ignited a spark of resolve. As he contemplated his next choice, Mark pondered the responsibilities he had built around him, the expectations of his team, his inheritance of familial pride linked to his success, the fear of regret. How could these calculations be reconciled with the yearning for true fulfillment? "Maybe I could take a different path," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "One that allows me to tell stories, inspire others in a way beyond profits." The concept of storytelling, of diving into a world rich with odd imagination, seemed increasingly compelling, almost as if it were emerging from the depths of a half-remembered dream. Lily nodded vigorously, the crumbs of the broken cookie settled in a friendly pile between them. "Then do it. If I can bake a cookie, you can make a film." His heart swelled at her unwavering belief in him. In that moment, the barriers he'd painstakingly erected around himself began to erode. Suddenly, the phone buzzed again, shattering the fragile atmosphere. It was a text from his assistant, the words stark and clinical: "Urgent. CEO meeting in 30 minutes to finalize the merger." Reality crashed back, an unwelcome intrusion to a fragile self-discovery. "What's wrong?" Lily asked, noting the disturbance etched across his face. "Just a decision I need to make," he replied, but the truth was heavier. The stakes felt enormous, the clash of choices weighing down on him. He could march back into the fray, a puppet to the demands of corporate life, or he could choose this spark ignited by a child, diverging toward the unknown. The realization lingered, unsettling yet charged. He stood on the brink of profound change, a pivot point blending vulnerability with the dreams he thought abandoned. The two paths split before him, the familiar and the untested. For the first time, Mark faced the truth of his own desires. If he dared to divert from the path laid out before him, he could dismantle the walls of isolation and step into who he truly was meant to be. But was he ready to defy everything he had built, even if it led him closer to his true self? With tension weaving through his thoughts, he turned from Lily and looked back at the phone again, heart pounding, the letter of his fate poised in his hand. It was a defining moment that would either bind him or liberate him. Now was the time to decide. Would he answer the call of ambition anew, or would he seize the flimsy tendril of hope offered by a little girl with a cookie? The moment of truth loomed just ahead. Mark's breath hitched as he stared at the phone, his heart racing. He could feel the weight of the corporate world pressing down on him, but now, he sensed the tantalizing whisper of a different life beckoning from the shadows. The meeting loomed, and with it, the expectations that had defined his life for far too long. "Lily, what if I don't want to go?" He found himself asking, the realization striking harder than he anticipated. It wasn't he merely avoiding another meeting, it was a rejection of his entire constructed identity. The little girl tilted her head, her round eyes wide open as though she could see through the layers of Mark's turmoil. "But what do you want to do?" She seemed to genuinely want to know, her open and honest demeanor radiating warmth. "I want to tell stories," Mark admitted, almost in a whisper, the admission igniting both fear and exhilaration within him. Could this small moment, a simple conversation, really alter the course of his life? "That's great," she chirped, oblivious to the grand implications of his revelation. "And you can do it. Let me help." A smile broke across his face, mirroring hers, but it didn't fully reach his eyes. The joy was tangled with anxiety, the feeling that he was teetering on the edge of a precipice. Would he lose everything he had worked for? Or was there an uncharted landscape of potential awaiting him, filled with creative expression rather than spreadsheets and boardroom presentations? He glanced back again at the phone, the message still glaring at him like a countdown timer full of dread. His pulse quickened as the tension of impending obligation threatened to drown out his awakening desire. "Lily, what if I fail?" "I've never done anything like this before," he said, the self-doubt surging back with the strength of a tidal wave. She stared for a long moment, her brow furrowed in deep thought. "But you're not just trying to do it for you. You're trying to do it for the people who want to hear your stories. Maybe even for people like me," she said, gesturing to the remnants of the cookie, "who need to remember that there are little moments of joy and connection." An unexpected wave of clarity washed over Mark. Perhaps this was what he needed, a reason beyond profit margins, beyond personal success. The thought ignited a burgeoning determination within him. "What if I start small?" he pondered aloud. "What if I write a short film, maybe about something that matters to me?" The idea felt liberating, as though he were shedding his skin, leaving behind the confines of his corporate persona. "Yes!" Lily exclaimed, the enthusiasm spilling over. "And you can make it about cookies and dreams and friendship." Her childlike enthusiasm became contagious. Mark began to envision a project that celebrated simple but profound connections crafted from the very lessons life had hurled his way. His creativity began to swirl in response to the challenge, energetically beckoning him forward. Feeling the pull of fate, especially in the light of Lily's unwavering support, Mark breathed deeply, centering himself. He was still on the precipice, but at least now, he could see the horizon, a glimmer of hope and the promise of self-discovery shining through the clouds of doubt. Finally, closing his eyes for a moment, he surrendered to the uncertainty, letting go of the tight grip of his past. Maybe it was time to take the leap. But just then, the phone buzzed again, and this time he felt the vibrations echo through his entire being, rippling through the newfound resolve that was barely taking shape. Lily's eyes darted to the screen, curiosity flickering as if she too sensed the incalculable importance of what was about to unfold. "Are you going to answer it?" she asked, innocence threading her voice, unaware that the answer could change everything. Mark felt the weight of both worlds press on him, the tantalizing new path and the daunting corporate commitment. He could feel the moment stretch infinitely, the air thick with tension. The choice was no longer binary. It wasn't just about ambition or creativity, it was about understanding his true self amid the chaos of expectations. What awaited him on the other side of this moment could lead to unprecedented transformations or retrenchment in the familiar cage he deconstructed for himself. As he hovered over the screen, uncertainty flickering in his chest, his heart beat out a different rhythm. The time had come to confront who he was versus who he had become. Would he answer the call and step back into the corporate fray, or would he answer the more profound call within him to create and connect? The moment of truth had arrived, and the echoes of his decision loomed just ahead. Mark's finger hovered over the glowing screen, the pulsating vibrations intertwining with the thrum of his heartbeat. The moment felt like a precipice, the chasm of his corporate life yawning beneath him while the sky of possibility curved overhead, promising uncharted heights. The corporate obligations felt tedious, suffocating each meeting and presentation, a brick adding weight to the walls of his self-imposed prison. Yet the tantalizing notion of storytelling fluttered in his chest, a paper crane yearning for flight. What would happen if I answered? Mark thought, grappling with his conflicting identities. The voice on the other end of the phone could lead him back to the arduous spiral that had become his everyday existence. It meant responsibility, deadlines, performance pressure. Yet, turning away felt equally daunting. He wouldn't just be rejecting the call, he would be confronting a lifetime of choices that defined his worth. Mark? Lily's innocent voice broke through his internal chaos. What is stopping you? Her wide eyes searched his, reflecting a depth of understanding that belied her years. Mark felt the unexpected comfort of her presence, anchoring him against his swirling thoughts. He remembered his childhood, the hours spent at the library, immersing himself in tales of adventure, rich characters painted with the colors of imagination. Writing had once been his refuge. Somehow, in the frantic pursuit of success, he buried that passion beneath endless spreadsheets. The phone buzzed again, a gentle reminder that the world outside was relentless, but Mark stood at a crossroad. What could he create that would resonate with those around him? Something authentic. Something that meant more than just a paycheck. Maybe, it's about more than just me, he murmured, the realization crystallizing. Mark turned away from the blinking notification, finding himself captivated by the simplicity of Lily's expression. Her grin radiated hope, a purity he hadn't felt in years. Yeah. You could tell a story about how cookies make friends. She suggested, her excitement bubbling over. The endearing idea took shape in his mind, two friends spurred into creativity by some warm cookies, their lives intersecting in ways neither had anticipated. He could structure a narrative around connection, exploring the magic of fleeting moments that lingered in the heart long after they were gone. Suddenly, the gravity of the situation shifted. Mark no longer felt paralyzed by fear, the spark of creativity ignited a sense of urgency within him. He envisioned characters, conflicts, and resolutions beginning to flourish. What if this was his opportunity to tell a story that could inspire, connect, and celebrate life's minutiae? Lily, he said, voice steadier now. I think I want to try. I want to write. Then go for it. I'll help however I can. She cheered, hopping in place as if her enthusiasm could jumpstart his ambition. The warmth of her belief seeped into his veins, flooding the crevices of doubt that still lingered. Mark wanted to capture not just the essence of friendship but the truth of their own experiences, how the small moments often led to the most significant transformations. As inspiration blossomed, an eclipsing thought nagged at him, what if he failed? What if this fledgling project crumbled beneath the weight of reality? Mark clenched his jaw, pushing the fear aside. Failure wasn't the enemy, he decided. It was merely a stepping stone, a lesson waiting to unfold. With a newfound sense of purpose coursing through him, he opened a blank document on his laptop and began typing. Ideas poured forth like a torrent, washing away debris from an uncharted path. Mark was no longer just a man staring at a phone, he was a storyteller crafting his destiny. But as the words flowed, another buzz pierced the air, a last vestige of the corporate world he was trying to escape. He hesitated, torn between the romance of creation and the pragmatism clamoring for his attention. Soon, a decision awaited that he hadn't anticipated, one that could shatter or solidify everything he had just begun building. Would he opt to silence the corporate pull forever, embracing the thrill of creativity, or retreat back to security? The lines blurred as both paths beckoned with equal fervor, and Mark felt the tension mount once more, a critical moment ready to expand or collapse. In this whirlwind of choices, something deep within urged him to push forward, to discover not just what he could create, but who he could become in the process. As the phone flickered one last time before him, the question loomed larger than life: was he ready to fully commit to the storyteller inside him, or would he allow the familiar chains of expectation to bind him once more? The decision teetered just out of reach, compelling him toward the next adventure lurking at the end of this chaotic revelation. Mark's fingers danced across the keyboard, crafting a world from mere words. Each tap resonated with a rhythm that felt liberating, a stark contrast to the methodical clicking of corporate meetings where every word was scrutinized. He was no longer drowning in financial projections, he was constructing a narrative, a bridge connecting the past that had haunted him to a future filled with possibilities. The characters sprang to life in his imagination. He envisioned an introverted boy and a spirited girl, their paths colliding through the serendipitous sharing of cookies. Each vignette unfolded an exploration of friendship, of vulnerability and shared experiences, of joy found in the simplest moments. There was a thrill in diving back into emotions that had lain dormant for far too long. Yet, the shadows of self-doubt snaked around his thoughts. What if the story faltered? What if its reception echoed the same indifferent feedback he faced in the boardroom? The risk felt immense, each word a potential target for criticism that could cut deeper than any corporate setback. Mark paused, breath catching as the weight of that fear pressed against his chest. Why does it matter so much? He questioned. The answer dawning within him felt like an epiphany. It was more than mere acceptance from others, this was about self-acceptance. The journey of telling this story could reveal truths about himself, allowing him to reconcile the person he had become with the dreamer he once was. In that moment of realization, the phone buzzed again, drawing his gaze momentarily. It wasn't just a notification, it was an extension of his corporate life, a reminder that deadlines and responsibilities awaited him. Mark sighed. Was it truly possible to step away from that identity? Just then, Lily's voice floated into his mind. You can do this, Mark. Her innocent encouragement ignited the embers of determination within him. He leaned back, eyes closing for a moment. What if he used this as a tool, a vehicle to explore not just his creativity but his latent fears and desires? Once more, he felt the pull of those childhood memories, the long, lazy afternoons spent lost in fiction, where heroes undertook grand quests. He had spent years in a corporate labyrinth, wearing a mask of professionalism that felt increasingly foreign. The realization struck him that this was his chance to reclaim not just his voice but his identity. Emboldened, Mark resumed typing with fervor. The fears that had clung to his creativity started to dissipate. As he wove the narrative, he began to reflect on moments from his own life that mirrored the character's struggles, the jealousy of colleagues who dismissed passion as naivete, the moments of isolation, and the exhilaration of finding a spark of connection unexpectedly. This wasn't just fiction, it was a reckoning. He began to realize that storytelling wasn't only about the tales we tell others, but profoundly about the stories we tell ourselves, the ones that shape our histories. With the outline of his first story taking shape, a new obstacle emerged: the question of what to do upon completion. Each word crafted a path outward, but it also beckoned him toward decisions that still felt precarious. Would he share this narrative with the world beyond his laptop? Would he dare to lay bare his creative heart before critics, friends, maybe even family? As he wrestled with these thoughts, his breath quickened. The weight of expectation from the corporate arena still loomed in the background, like a specter waiting for an opportune moment to draw him back. Mark felt the urgency of action as immense as the storytelling itself. This entire venture would demand courage, revealing deeper layers of his personality and ambitions. Enough pondering, he muttered under his breath, it's time to act. Before he could second-guess himself, he began drafting an email. The words spilled forth a description of his story, a request for feedback from a few trusted colleagues who had long known the writer buried beneath the executive mask. The moment he hit send, a pulse of adrenaline surged through him, a cocktail of excitement and anxiety. Had he truly taken the first step into the unknown? As he stared at the screen, his heart thudding in his chest, he was ready for whatever came next. But unresolved was a nagging doubt: would the world embrace his new path, or would it reject the authenticity he dared to share? In that electrifying instant, he realized he was moving closer to a crossroads with far-reaching consequences. Was he ready to redefine success for himself, or would he ultimately return to the man behind the corporate curtain? The adventure was only beginning, and the stakes felt higher than ever. The days following Mark's email felt like an eternity. Each morning began with a flicker of hope, only to dissolve by noon under a rising tide of anxiety. Feedback was not just potential acknowledgement, it was a silent judgment, echoing down the corridors of creativity. He replayed the moment of hitting send in his mind repeatedly, as if expecting an answer to the question that loomed like a specter: had he done the right thing? During his lunch break, he often found himself in his car, parked in the far corner of the lot, fingers gripping the steering wheel, grappling with the weight of his choices. The airtight confines of the vehicle provided him an illusion of sanctuary, but even there, self-doubt seeped in. His phone buzzed, and he immediately glanced at it, heart racing. Another notification, but not the one he wanted. The familiar barrage of work emails flooded his screen, a relentless reminder of the corporate life he was trying to escape. Each time he opened his laptop, the cursor on an empty document mocked him. He was compelled to create, yet paralyzed by the fear of inadequacy. The shine of a budding writer dimmed by the reality of who he had once been. As doubt crept back in, he stumbled upon an article on the difference between personal success and professional achievement. Each phrase resonated, channeling a long-stifled yearning inside him. He sat up straighter, feeling that familiar spark reignite, telling himself that this time, failure wouldn't equal rejection, it could merely be a step toward growth. That evening, an email finally arrived, a response from one of his colleagues. Tentative anticipation turned into trembling hands as he opened it. Was it praise or critique? Slowly, he read through the lines that felt like they could shatter or build him anew. "Mark," it began, "your story echoes with authenticity. I was moved by your courage to reflect so honestly on your own experiences." But the "but" was inevitable. His heart sank briefly. He braced himself for a litany of corrections, suggestions to filter out the rawness, to lessen the vulnerability. As he read on, however, the feedback transformed. Instead of an assault on his craftsmanship, the message lent a sense of encouragement toward further exploration, ramifications that his narrative held beyond mere storytelling. Pink highlighter marks dotted the digital margins where he needed clarity, places where the emotional weight clashed with narrative coherence. It wasn't a condemnation, it was a call to dig deeper, to bring the thoughts more clearly to the surface, much like a sculptor discovering the statue contained within the stone. His eyes widened. That was it, wasn't he it? Mark was the sculptor, chiseling away the layers of self-protection he had built around himself over the years. It was not solely about telling a story, it was about unveiling himself in the process. The writing became a form of self-exploration, laying bare the very core of who he was and what he feared. With renewed conviction, he set to work that night, embodying a determined artist. He typed rapidly, pouring more of his essence into each character. The boy and the girl in his story became extensions of himself, forging paths he had only dreamt about. The words flowed, buoyed by a growing understanding of the world he wanted to create and his role within it. But that moment of clarity became weighted with another concern. What if the deeper truths he explored bared him completely, ripping away the carefully constructed armor of his corporate life? Would he still be accepted in a world that valued the polished over the genuine? As he looked at the screen, a new sense of dread mingled with his exhilaration. With creativity came risk, the risk of vulnerability, the risk of rejection. Was he prepared to face the judgment of those who knew him as a corporate titan? The echoes of voices both encouraging and critical flooded his mind, amplifying the tension. This was no longer just a story, it was an unveiling, a confrontation with the hardest truths of his own life. In a fit of resolve, he saved the document and decided he needed a break, stepping outside into the fresh air. The chill against his skin was a waking slap, scrambling his thoughts. But as he stared up at the vastness of the night sky, filled with untouchable stars, the immensity of possibility loomed large. Mark's contemplative moment shattered when his phone buzzed again, this time disturbing the reverie that had spiraled him into calm. As he glanced at it, the sender caught him off guard, another colleague from his past, someone he hadn't interacted with in years. The subject line simply read, "Meet me." His pulse quickened. Could this be an unexpected bridge between his two worlds? With pounding heart and a mind swimming with questions, he tapped a response, eager for clarity yet uncertain of the consequences that awaited on the other side. The adventure of rediscovery had only just begun, and the paths before him twisted with implications he could hardly fathom. The days that followed Mark's response were a curious mix of hope and trepidation. The reality of his unfolding journey felt surreal, the weight of uncertainty clinging to him like a fog. The wait for a reply from his former colleague gnawed at him, each tick of the clock amplifying his inner turmoil. He began to question if he was prepared for whatever might come next. Was he ready to step further into this new version of himself, or would he shrivel back into the corporate identification that had consumed so much of his life? While his mind raced, he turned his focus back to the story he had been writing. The characters had become living entities, breathing pieces of his psyche. He fleshed out their arcs, pulling from motifs of grief, love, and self-discovery, all themes that mirrored his own life in some capacity. The deeper he delved, the more he unearthed hidden competencies he hadn't recognized before. His ability to weave emotional complexity into narrative bore testament to his journey thus far. He was starting to recognize his voice. When the email finally arrived, he felt a mix of exhilaration and anxiety that brought him to the edge of complete distraction. The instant he opened it, his heart raced even faster. The digital words blazed across the screen like an electric pulse. "It's been too long, Mark. I'd love to catch up. Let's meet tomorrow at the cafe on 5th. The simplistic nature of the message belied the tumult it incited within him. Could he confront a figure from his past while grappling with the swirling identity crisis brought on by his writing? The thought sent a shiver down his spine, escalating the stakes of their meeting. Mark spent the evening pacing his apartment, rehearsing every word he might say, unsure if he was prepared to share the new facets of himself that had begun to emerge. As the evening waned, he settled at his laptop, the blinking cursor an unyielding reminder that words could shape reality. He typed, reflecting on his journey, resisting the urge to make excuses for who he had been. Typing and erasing sentences became his ritual, a testament to his struggle against the internal critical voice that whispered doubts about his worthiness as a writer. After a restless night, he woke with an urgency that eclipsed his anxious predictions. The cafe loomed in his mind, transforming into both a meeting point and a symbolic juncture, a place where the past would converge with his resonating present. Mark donned clothes that felt alien but invigorating. Dressing differently felt akin to shedding old skin, a small yet bold marker of change. As he walked into the cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted over him, intoxicating and vaguely familiar. It felt like a new beginning, but the clenching in his stomach betrayed his facade of courage. He spotted the colleagues sitting at a corner table, their expression unreadable. "Mark," she greeted, her voice pulling him from his inner chaos. As they exchanged pleasantries and sipped coffee that grew increasingly cold, conversation flowed naturally before he could overthink. Yet, beneath the surface, he sensed the weight of the impending moment where he would have to choose to bear a piece of his evolving self. In between anecdotes of corporate life and the banalities of the industry, a loaded silence enveloped them. Then, she unabashedly broke it. "So, Mark, what's next for you?" The simplicity of the question struck him harder than expected, echoing so many of his own thoughts, amplifying his internal dilemma. Was it time to share his newfound pursuit of writing, or would he retreat into safe waters, sheltering his vulnerability away from scrutiny? His throat tightened as he weighed honesty against risk. It was a moment he had anticipated, but now that it had arrived, the truth felt as weighty as a stone. The urge to smooth over the complexities of his identity reared its head, but a new voice within him pushed back. This was a defining choice, to embrace the path of authenticity or remain shackled to an identity he had outgrown. Gathering his Breath, Mark looked her straight in the eyes and conjured the resolve he had begun fostering through writing, a reflexive assertion of his burgeoning identity. I'm exploring writing, actually. It's where I feel most alive, he confessed, his heart pounding at the audacity of his statement. Her eyebrows raised, surprise dancing on her features, but within seconds a radiant smile broke through. The ripple of acceptance in her expression buoyed him momentarily, reminding him that his risk had potential reward. But as the conversation shifted, Mark realized this wasn't merely a check-in with a colleague. It was a direct confrontation with his past, a test of the new persona he was shaping. And with the question of his future left hanging in the air charged with anticipation, Mark's determination solidified. He was at the edge of a precipice, navigating through uncertainty towards a possibly transformative journey. As they delved deeper into conversation, clues about her own journey emerged, revealing commonalities that ignited another flicker of connection between them. Just as he began to feel a wave of encouragement wash over him, a text message erupted his reverie, a notification that rattled him anew. "Mark, can we talk? I need to discuss something important. Is tomorrow too soon?" His heart raced again, for the sender was a name that held both promise and dread, igniting the unpredictable waters he had just begun to navigate. Would this lead him further into vulnerability or chaos? As the conversation meandered between Mark and his colleague, the lingering weight of the text message pulsed like an unanswered question, an uninvited intruder drawing his thoughts away from the moment unfolding before him. He offered vague nods and half-hearted responses, entranced yet disoriented. He was at once present, sharing laughter and stories, and absent, wrestling with the implications of that message and who could be behind it. "What is going on? You seem a million miles away," she remarked, her brows knitting with concern. Her perceptiveness jolted Mark back to the café, starkly contrasting the comforting yet erratic world he had been immersed in the past few days. "It's nothing really. Just a message from an old contact," he deflected, but the remark only fueled his inner scrutiny. Was it really nothing, or was he simply terrified to unpack that lingering chaos? As the conversation flowed, he wrestled with the invisible twins of fear and aspiration. The cheerful café buzzed around them, people immersed in their own lives, unaware of the subtle transformation shaping Mark's reality. The dissonance felt almost palpable. Here, he was sharing his passion for writing, and in another heartbeat, he faced a critical juncture that could redirect his path entirely. When their coffees had long cooled, she leaned in closer. "You know, I admire that you're taking the leap into writing. It takes guts to step out of your comfort zone." Her sincerity shimmered amidst the uncertainty. "Many people talk about pursuing their dreams but never do it." Her words wrapped around him like an embrace, igniting something dormant within. "It's a journey, for sure," he confessed, surprised by his candidness. "But it's harder than I thought. My past feels like an anchor. I'm constantly questioning if I can truly make this work." "That's normal," she replied, her eyes reflecting a depth of understanding that reassured him. "Growth demands discomfort. It's all part of the process. Don't let your past dictate your potential." Mark absorbed her encouragement like a parched desert thirsting for rain. Yet, a creeping fear shadowed the positivity. What if he failed? What if that text message unleashed a tidal wave of his past? Before he could spiral down that path, an old instinct stirred. He sought clarity in his mind, prioritizing personal resolution over the external chaos. The text flickering on his phone wasn't just an alert. It represented a choice to welcome chaos or assert his emerging self. Determination anchored his voice. "I need to explore this side of myself without inhibition, even if it means facing uncomfortable truths." "Writing has become vital," he asserted, the words spilling forth fueled by newfound conviction. "That's the spirit," she encouraged, her smile expansive. "And think of it this way, every great writer has faced rejection and failure. It's part of crafting a compelling narrative." The moment sparked a realization in him, a connection threading his immediate experience with his writing. He had been so focused on what could go wrong that he failed to see his unfolding story, rich with potential. Just as he contemplated this integration, his phone buzzed violently again, an urgency in its message. Anticipation constricted his chest as he hesitated before looking. The sender, a name once resonant in his life, now evoked both heartache and hope. "Mark, can we talk? I need to discuss something important. Is tomorrow too soon?" It felt like an appointment with destiny. His fingers hovered over the screen. Engaging meant exploring either a painful chapter or a potential renewal. But was he ready to embrace an encounter that could unveil more than he dared to confront? With his heart pounding, he forced himself to consider it. Perhaps clarity awaited him in this connection, just as it had begun to bloom in the cafe. He shot a quick response, committing to meet, sealing his decision with a blend of excitement and dread. As he lowered his phone, he felt his colleague's eyes keenly observing him, her intuition attuned to his internal battle. "We got this. Trust your instincts," she said softly, grounding him back to this moment. Though he felt raw and torn, validation flowed from her like a tide lifting a ship. He smiled, embracing the warmth of possibility blossoming amidst the uncertainties. Yet, beneath that budding courage simmered the awareness that while he could ignite his narrative, old plots could not be easily rewritten. The cafe felt like a chapter closing, the challenges ahead loomed like an unwritten story. As he strove to weave together the fragments of his fragmented identity, he wondered if he was truly ready to turn the page. With their conversation lingering in the air, the next chapter awaited. A decision lay ahead, one that could redefine not only who he was but the entire trajectory of his life. What would that meeting reveal, and would he step willingly into its fallout? Mark arrived at the cafe the next day with a knot of anxiety tightening in his chest. He replayed the details of his message back in his mind, afraid of what unearthing the past might mean for his present. The familiar surroundings belied the storm brewing inside him. As he settled into his seat, he glanced around. The same cozy ambience now felt like a stage set for confrontation. Each clink of cups and burst of laughter felt alien, echoing in the backdrop of his internal dialogue. The very essence of his aspirations clashed against the shadows of his memories, and doubt swirled like smoke around him. He noticed her entering, a silhouette at first, gradually morphing into a figure tinged with nostalgia. When she made her way to him, the warmth of their past spilled between them, but with it, an undercurrent of unresolved tension hung thick in the air. "Hey, it's good to see you," she said, her smile hesitant. But beneath her cheerful demeanor, Mark discerned a flicker of wariness and acknowledgement that they were treading on delicate ground. "Yeah," Mark replied, words tumbling out with awkwardness. "Thanks for reaching out. I know it's been a while," she began, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "But there are things we need to address. I wanted to start fresh, to clarify everything." As she spoke, Mark's heart raced. The past loomed large, a specter he could no longer ignore. A confrontation with it felt inevitable. Visibility into his history had blurred their earlier connection, and he was unsure whether he had the strength to navigate its complexities. About what happened back then she hesitated. A flood of memories surged within him, not just the pain but the lessons buried within hurt. He had spent years desiring closure, yet he braced himself for the possibility that this reckoning could send shivers through his newfound determination. Could he handle the storm waiting to be unleashed? Mark interrupted impulsively, needing to exert control over this narrative. "I've changed a lot since then. Writing has really become a part of who I am. And honestly, I'm starting to get people's reactions to it." Her eyes widened slightly, disbelief mixed with intrigue. "You're serious? You're pursuing writing?" "Yes. I've stopped second-guessing myself." The words flowed, clear and resolute. "But my past, it feels like it might be an anchor. I want to move forward with my life, but those ghosts, they never seem to fully let go, do they?" She lowered her gaze, absorbing his admission. The silence that emerged felt charged, each heartbeat ticking against the uncertain future that lay before them. "Maybe we're both holding on to burdens that don't reflect who we've become," she offered softly, uncovering layers of an old connection. Perhaps we need to put everything on the table. His breath caught as he contemplated this suggestion. To share this moment felt monumental, a potential turning point that could pave a clearer path for his future. Yet part of him recoiled, hesitant to face the shadows that had lingered too long. "What are you saying?" he pressed, desperate to understand. "I want us to talk about the past fully, confront it together. Let us rewrite that chapter," she insisted with conviction. Her words hinted at a provocative challenge, blending intricately with his growing desire to shape his future. Yet doubt flickered within him, battling against her empowerment. Was he ready to expose those intimate vulnerabilities, to sift through the ashes of regret and confront the truth? He exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of her invitation. Could this become a pivotal moment of transformation, illuminating pathways that he had deemed irreparable? Would it help him reclaim his narrative, or would it shackle him further to the weights he aimed to shed? As they delved into dialogue, Mark's resolve surged like a wave, propelling him toward unfamiliar shores of possibility. The texture of confession and reconnection rippled across the space between them, marking a potential rebirth of self. With each exchanged word, he began to sense a shift, the faintest glimmer of hope illuminating his path. But he knew that the journey ahead would demand not just courage, but a willingness to face the specters of yesterday squarely in the eye. Just then, a loud thud echoed from a nearby table, pulling Mark sharply from his introspection. He looked over to see a stack of papers scattered across the floor, causing a brief uproar as customers helped pick them up. It was a chaotic reminder of how quickly things could shift. Mark returned his gaze to her. "Are we sure we can handle doing this?" A challenge woven with fear and anticipation hung in the air. In that heartbeat, the moment crystallized. Could this conversation open a new chapter of healing, or would it unearth ghosts which would bury him deeper? The moment lay poised on a knife's edge, waiting for him to make the next move. Mark sat in the same cafe, but this time it felt different, an oasis of clarity amidst the confusion of his thoughts. The past few weeks had transformed him beyond measure, and now, facing a conversation that promised to reshape his narrative, he felt the poised balance of vulnerability and courage intertwining. With his heart beating steadily, he looked into the eyes of his former colleague, the woman who held both strands of their shared history and the possibilities of their futures. "So, what do we need to address?" he began, resolute in his intention to break the silence that had lingered like a fog. Her thoughtful gaze met his, and for a moment, time seemed suspended. "I think we need to confront the tension that has always been there between who we were and who we've become," she replied, her voice steady but soft, revealing an understanding that transcended their previous corporate personas. Mark felt a thrill of recognition. Her words reflected his journey back to writing, the narrative he was weaving that blurred the lines between personal and professional, and called out to something deeper within him. They spoke of fear, dreams deferred, and the relentless pursuit of success that had often overshadowed both their authentic selves. "The person I was focused solely on achievements," Mark admitted, his voice gaining strength. "I've spent too many years believing that monetary success equated to personal fulfillment, hiding behind a facade I meticulously crafted." He recalled the lonely boardrooms of profit margins, realizing they no longer defined him. Instead, they simply reminded him of what he longed to escape. His colleague nodded, encouraging him to elaborate. "And it's taken this leap back into storytelling for me to realize that my real achievement lies in the connections and emotions rooted in every narrative I share. I want to tell stories that invite others in, that amplify the beauty of our experiences." From her expression, he could see she was captivated, relating to the transformation he described. Mark felt a shared pulse between them, a growing understanding formed through their reconciliation of the past and their ambitions. "I remember when we used to talk about authenticity," she recalled, her voice imbued with nostalgia. "We both saw this need for it in the corporate world but never pursued it ourselves. What changed?" "Life happened," Mark replied candidly. "I lost myself somewhere along the trajectory of achievements. But now, a little girl with a cookie helped me see I want fulfillment through creativity, connection, and continuous transformation." Mark's resolve felt formidable as he spoke these words. It wasn't just an acceptance, it was a transformation that had taken root deep inside him. He felt free from the chains of his former self, standing in the spotlight of clarity. Expressing his competencies amidst the intersections of personal growth and vulnerability felt liberating. She leaned in closer, no longer hesitant. I admire your courage, Mark. We saved masks for the corporate world, and perhaps it's time to drop them entirely and forge a new narrative. Nodding, Mark felt the swell of emotions rise within him. Each exchanged word bubbled up sentiments he had almost forgotten, the dreams he had buried under the weight of ambition, the hope he had fought to sustain, the laughter he hadn't shared in years. He could feel a renewed commitment to the story he was drawing out on paper and in life, a life unencumbered by external validation. I think it's time we both dive into telling these stories, he said, the words tumbling forth with newfound vigor. After all, we've turned so many pages in the corporate chapters of our lives. What would it look like to write something authentically ours moving forward? The air buzzed with promise, and as their dialogue flowed, Mark recognized he was stepping deeper into the unknown. It felt invigorating, each piece of honesty sparked clarity. Here, in this cafe, he was no longer a choice tethered to the past, he was becoming a storyteller shaping his reality and allowing personal narratives to flourish amid the complexities of life. As the conversation deepened, Mark realized it was not just the reconciliations he sought. It was the acknowledgement of his journey and the excitement of where it might lead next. They discussed their dreams extensively and mutually agreed to encourage one another in this unpredictable venture. As time slipped away like grains of sand, something affirmed across the table, a shared commitment to embrace narratives that inspired connection, vulnerability, and most importantly, authenticity. As they finally pulled away from the table, both smiled with a leveled gaze. Mark stood taller, braver. I'd like to celebrate our fresh beginnings. She mirrored his tenacity, and they agreed to continue their journeys, incorporating shared creative aims into their lives, offering feedback on stories that echoed their discoveries. Each word they exchanged felt like a building block for the future. And so, Mark walked away from the cafe, brimming with inspiration. With a clear sense of direction, he resolved to continue crafting his story, shedding the constraints of expectation. The journey awaited, a vast expanse of possibilities beckoning him forward, beyond the walls of his past decisions and insecurities. In this moment of clarity, he smiled. He now held the pen, and the narrative would be anything but ordinary. A new chapter unfurled, rich with honesty, creativity, and in the end profound personal fulfillment. The call to create was stronger than ever, and as he ventured forth, he couldn't shake the exhilarating feeling that he was finally becoming the author of his own life. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.